So, if you were advising both parties, let's start with the Republicans. I don't know if there's popular will to continue to have Trump in that lead seat. He's got such a strong lead at this point. People are almost talking about it as a fait accompli. What would you be advising the other GOP candidates to do? Focus on the economy?
Well, I'd advise them to focus on the economy, focus on the suburban voter, right? Over 50% of the Republican Party is suburban. There are almost no urbanites in the party, and the rural vote is pretty much in Trump's hands. So I'd look at what are the concerns, the kinds of things that I think Youngkin kind of more pulled off. And obviously, they've got to moderate some of their abortion stand. Focus on the really middle class life, right? How do you get back to houses you can afford, food you can afford, gasoline you can afford? How do you really talk about the middle class squeeze, and how are you gonna do something about it? The taxes you can't pay, right? And that's really what's on number one on the minds of these voters, and particularly these Republican voters. And I don't think that any of the candidates have really successfully addressed it. And then I would suggest they go in a room and draw lots, okay? Because if they don't hang together, they are all going to hang separately.
It's interesting you mentioned Youngkin because Steve Forbes, one of the things he's looking at is the potential for a Youngkin-Haley ticket. Do you think that's possible?
I think it would be a great ticket, but it's not possible. He didn't run.
Well,
And
it's early days yet, potentially.
well, I'm not sure you can get on the well, there's maybe a little bit of time left to get on the primary ballots, right? If you generally, I think somewhere by mid-October they're closed. I don't know that another Republican, candidate into the mix here could really sweep it, particularly somebody who's not as well known across the country. No, I really think they've got to kind of consolidate their opposition. It'd be interesting if he got in. I do think he'd have a chance, and I do think Haley at this point, frankly, is the presidential candidate. Would do incredibly well. I think Tim Scott would do well. I think DeSantis is I think Vivek probably a little bit more like one of these temporary blips, if I had to really guess. And I think
Yeah.
DeSantis had a lot of promise, but it's really hard for him to right the ship.